What if I told you the Indiana Fever didn't just accidentally stumble into an 18-14 record and Commissioner's Cup championship? What if everything you think you know about their roster construction is completely backwards? I'm Jackson Riley, and I've been connecting the dots that other channels completely miss. While everyone's arguing about individual player statistics, they're missing the masterpiece that's been building in Indianapolis. The Fever didn't just sign random veterans and hope for the best. They executed one of the most sophisticated roster blueprints in WNBA history, specifically designed to unlock Caitlin Clark's championship potential. And here's what the surface analysts won't tell you. This wasn't luck. This was strategic genius. Before we dive into the digital breadcrumbs I've been following, hit that like button if you want the real insider perspective on how championship teams are actually built. Because what I'm about to show you will completely change how you see this Fever roster. Here's the roadmap for today. First, I'm going to expose the three-phase blueprint that the Fever front office has been quietly executing. Then we'll break down how each controversial signing was actually a calculated chess move. And finally, I'll reveal the temperature of the online conversation that suggests this blueprint is about to pay massive dividends. So let's start with what everyone missed. The Fever's roster construction follows a blueprint that most teams never even attempt. Phase 1 was the foundation, securing Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston as your cornerstones. That's your present and future right there. But Phase 2? That's where the real intelligence shows. Phase 2 was veteran integration, and this is where everyone gets it wrong. The Fever didn't sign Natasha Howard, Damiris Dantas, and Sydney Colson because they needed immediate statistical production. They signed them because they needed championship DNA. Here's what I mean. Natasha Howard isn't just averaging 11.6 points and 6.8 rebounds. She's anchoring a top-5 defensive system that's transformed how this team plays. The temperature of the online conversation shows that defensive coordinators around the league are studying Indiana's schemes, and Howard is the central piece. But here's what the digital breadcrumbs reveal that nobody's talking about. Howard's advanced defensive metrics tell a completely different story than her basic box score. She's switching everything, calling out rotations and teaching younger players how to think the game at a championship level. And this connects to something even deeper. Reading the signals from front office moves, the Fever weren't just building a team to win now. They were building a system that could sustain excellence throughout Caitlin Clark's prime. Think about it this way. Clark is 23 years old. She's got potentially a decade plus of elite basketball ahead of her. You don't waste that window by surrounding her with young, talented players who need 3 years to develop. You surround her with veterans who can maximize her impact immediately while teaching the young core how to maintain that level. But the story doesn't end there, because Phase 3 is where this blueprint gets absolutely brilliant. Now, let's get into rumor territory. Nothing is officially confirmed, but the online chatter is too loud to ignore. Multiple sources suggest that the Kelsey Mitchell contract extension discussions aren't just about keeping a scorer. They're about perfecting the most dangerous backcourt combination in the league. Mitchell isn't averaging 19.9 points per game by accident alongside Clark. These two have developed a chemistry that's honestly unprecedented for a backcourt this young in their partnership. The film study shows they're reading each other's tendencies, creating space for each other, and most importantly, both players are elevating their games instead of competing for touches. Here's the part that'll blow your mind. Filtering through. The noise from league executives, multiple sources suggest other teams have tried to replicate this backcourt dynamic and failed spectacularly. The reason? They focused on talent instead of fit. The Fever understood something that other franchises completely missed. Caitlin Clark doesn't need another playmaker. She needs someone who can score at all three levels while moving without the ball. Mitchell spent years developing that exact skill set before Clark arrived. But here's where the blueprint gets even more sophisticated. Official sources won't tell you this, but if you follow the digital breadcrumbs, a different picture emerges about how this partnership was years in the making. The Fever's front office studied Clark's college game film for 2 years before she was draft eligible. They identified that her playmaking thrives when she has a scoring guard who can create her own shot, but also doesn't need the ball to be effective. That player profile led them directly to prioritizing Mitchell's development and retention. Now compare that to teams that try to pair two ball-dominant guards and wonder why their offense gets stagnant. The Fever were 3 steps ahead. But here's what's really fascinating about this blueprint. The role-player integration is where most teams completely fall apart. Let me break down what I've discovered about how this veteran network actually functions, because this is where the blueprint reveals its true genius. Sydney Colson's role wasn't about her 2.5 points per game before her ACL injury. She was brought in as a cultural translator, someone who could communicate with veterans like Howard while connecting with younger players like Clark. The temperature of the online conversation from players around the league suggests Colson's locker room impact was massive before the injury. But here's what they missed when she went down. The blueprint was designed with redundancy. Damiris Dantas stepped into that veteran voice role while maintaining her international experience and FIBA-level basketball IQ. Okay, now let's get into speculation territory. The digital signals point to something even more interesting about how these veterans were selected. Multiple sources suggest the Fever used advanced personality profiling to ensure these veterans would mesh specifically with Clark's work ethic and competitive drive. Here's what that means practically. Howard, Dantas, and Colson all have championship experience, but more importantly, they all thrive in systems where they're not the primary option. They understand how to maximize a superstar's impact without ego conflicts. Reading the signals from practice reports and film sessions, these veterans are teaching Clark and Boston things you can't learn from younger players. How to handle playoff pressure, how to make adjustments mid-series, how to maintain focus when everyone's watching your every move. But the most brilliant part of this blueprint, it's forward-thinking in a way that most teams never achieve. Following the thread of front office decision-making, the Fever aren't just building for this season or next season. They're building a culture that can reload and maintain excellence for the entire Clark era. Here's what I mean. The contract structures, the age distribution, the skill set diversity, everything is designed so that as older veterans naturally transition out, younger players who've been developed within this system can step into their roles seamlessly. The temperature of the league-wide conversation suggests this approach is revolutionary. Most teams build for immediate windows and then face massive rebuilds. The Fever are building a sustainable championship culture. But here's where it gets even more sophisticated. The blueprint includes developing players like Chloe Bibby and Michaela Onyenwere specifically to fit Clark's playing style. They're not just acquiring talent. They're developing talent that complements their superstars' specific needs. Official sources won't tell you this, but if you follow the digital breadcrumbs, multiple league executives have quietly studied the Fever's approach. The consensus? This is how you maximize a generational talent without wasting years of their prime. And here's what's really remarkable. The Commissioner's Cup championship wasn't the peak of this blueprint. It was validation that the foundation is solid, and ready for bigger things. Connecting the dots from playoff projections and advanced analytics, the Fever are positioned to be competitive immediately while having the flexibility to make championship-level upgrades without destroying their core, chemistry. But let's talk about what this blueprint means for the future, because this is where it gets truly exciting. Filtering out the noise from hot take artists and social media reactions, the actual basketball intelligence community understands what the Fever have built here. This isn't a one-year wonder or a flash in the pan. This is a sustainable championship foundation. Here's the proof. Teams that build around generational talents typically face a choice: win now with veterans or build for the future with young talent. The Fever found a third option: win now with veterans who are also teaching the young talent how to sustain that level. The temperature of the online conversation from championship-level organizations suggests this blueprint is being studied and potentially copied around the league. But here's the thing about copying. You need the right centerpiece to make it work. Caitlin Clark isn't just a talented player. She's a system-elevating superstar who makes everyone around her better. The blueprint works because it was designed specifically around her unique skill set and basketball IQ. Reading the signals from analytics departments, Clark's impact on teammates' efficiency ratings is unprecedented for a player in just her second season. The veterans aren't just helping her develop. She's helping them rediscover elite levels of their own games. But here's what the blueprint reveals about the Fever's ultimate vision that honestly gives me chills. Now, let's get into the temperature of the conversations happening in front offices around the league, because this is where the blueprint's true ambition becomes clear. The Fever aren't just building a championship team. They're building a championship organization. The veteran leadership network, the player development system, the cultural foundation. Everything is designed to attract and develop elite talent for the next decade. Here's what that means. When star players around the league hit free agency, they're going to look at Indianapolis and see exactly what they want: a proven system, championship culture, and the chance to play alongside one of the most dynamic players in basketball history. The digital breadcrumbs from agent conversations suggest this blueprint is already creating momentum. Veterans who might have never considered Indianapolis are now interested in being part of something special. But there's something even more significant happening here. The blueprint is proving that small market teams can compete for championships if they're smart about roster construction and culture building. Official sources won't tell you this, but if you follow the signals from league office discussions, the Fever's success is being studied as a potential model for how other franchises can maximize their own superstars. And here's the part that connects everything together. This blueprint wasn't just about basketball. It was about changing the entire trajectory of a franchise and potentially influencing how championship teams are built league-wide. Filtering through all the analysis and hot takes circulating online, here's what separates the Fever's approach from every other team trying to build around a superstar. They understood that Caitlin Clark's impact extends beyond basketball. Her marketability, her fan engagement, her cultural influence, the blueprint accounts for all of that. The veterans they selected, the young players they're developing, the organizational culture they're building, everything enhances Clark's off-court impact while maximizing her on-court potential. Reading the signals from sponsorship deals and media partnerships, the Fever are positioning themselves as the premier destination for elite players who want to maximize both their basketball and business opportunities. But here's what's really brilliant about this blueprint. It's scalable. As the Fever's success grows, they can attract higher-level veterans, better role players, and more elite young talent. The foundation gets stronger with each successful season. The temperature of the conversation from former WNBA champions suggests what the Fever have built is reminiscent of the greatest dynasties in basketball history. Not just the talent, but the culture, the system, and the long-term vision. And that brings us to the inevitable question that everyone should be asking. So what's fact and what's speculation about where this blueprint leads? Let's break it down, based on the digital intelligence I've been tracking. Fact: the Fever are 18-14 with a Commissioner's Cup championship in just the second year of the Clark era. That's unprecedented success for a young superstar and a retooled roster. Fact: the Veteran Leadership Network has created a top-5 defensive system while maintaining an elite offensive rating. That's exactly what championship teams look like. Rumor. Reported, league executives believe the Fever are one elite role player away from being legitimate championship contenders. Multiple sources suggest they're actively pursuing that final piece. Social speculation. The online temperature suggests if the Fever make the right moves this offseason, they could be the betting favorites for next year's championship. Here's what the signals tell me about the timeline. This blueprint typically takes 3 to 4 years to reach full potential. The Fever are ahead of schedule, which suggests they might accelerate that timeline with the right additions. But here's the most exciting part. Even if they don't win it all this year, the foundation they've built makes them a threat for the entire Clark era. That's what sustainable excellence looks like. Reading the temperature of the online conversation from the most connected voices in basketball, the consensus is clear. The Fever didn't just get lucky with their roster construction. They executed a championship blueprint that other teams are going to be studying and trying to replicate for years. Following the thread of how this blueprint has evolved, here's what proves its effectiveness beyond any individual statistics or single-season success. The culture they've created is attracting attention from players who weren't even considering Indianapolis before Clark arrived. The system they've implemented is making average players good and good players great. The foundation they've built is sustainable regardless of personnel changes. That's what separates great organizations from good teams. The Fever have built something that transcends individual talent and creates a competitive advantage that compounds over time. And here's what gives me the most confidence in this blueprint's future success. It's based on intelligence, not emotion. Every move has been calculated. Every signing has served a purpose. Every development decision has been part of a larger vision. The temperature of the conversation from championship-level coaches suggests this kind of systematic approach is exactly how sustained excellence is built in professional sports. But, more than that, the blueprint proves something important about how to maximize generational talent. You don't just surround them with good players. You create an entire ecosystem designed to amplify their impact while preparing for long-term success. So here's what we've discovered about the Fever's hidden blueprint. This wasn't random veteran signings and hopeful development. This was a sophisticated, multi-phase strategy designed to create sustainable championship excellence around Caitlin Clark. The Veteran Leadership Network provides immediate impact and long-term development. The backcourt chemistry creates matchup nightmares for opposing teams. The organizational culture attracts and develops elite talent, and the forward-thinking approach ensures this competitive advantage will compound over time. Reading all the I bet you signals and connecting all the dots, the Fever have built something special in Indianapolis. Not just a good team, but a championship blueprint that could define the next decade of WNBA basketball. The temperature of the conversation from the UI, most knowledgeable voices in the sport, suggests we're watching the early stages of something truly historic. A small market team that figured out how to maximize generational talent while building sustainable excellence. And that's the real story that other channels completely miss. This isn't about individual players or single-season success. This is about organizational intelligence and long-term vision, creating a competitive advantage that could last for years. What do you think about this blueprint? Are the Fever building the next WNBA dynasty? Or are there gaps in this strategy that I'm missing? Drop your analysis in the comments and let's connect the dots together. If this insider perspective opened your eyes to how championship teams are really built, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Because this is exactly the kind of deep intelligence that the narrative analysts community lives for. Share this with every basketball intelligence fan you know, because understanding how dynasties are built is what separates casual observers from true students of the game. The Fever's blueprint is just getting started, and we're going to be here tracking every signal, connecting every dot, and revealing every piece of the championship puzzle as it unfolds.